It's just not working. Oh hey, didn't see you there. I'm just trying to think of ways to make this expired jar of mayonnaise more appealing to a general consumer base, but nothing I can try is working. Wait a minute, this is just a metaphor for Q*bert, isn't it? Oh come on, not again!
Before home video game consoles were really okay, well, they were a thing, but like, come on. Keeping up with all the hottest releases meant there was only really one place you were going. And that place was an arcade, cause where else can you go to get robbed, and while you're at it, maybe even get robbed? I know it's hard to think back on a time before Clay Fighter was a thing we all had access to in the comfort of our own homes, but there was once a time where the only way to get the best gaming experience was to suck down your shame and let everyone watch you publicly suck ass at Frogger. But after the release of the Famicom, or Nintendo Entertainment System as it's called here, the gaming market started to undergo some changes. Now that wasn't the only reason the market went through some weird form of puberty. There was a whole video game crash that happened a few years prior, but that's a topic for another day. Games were slowly starting to place more focus on stories and characters with definitive endings instead of just being endless. Now with all that being said, performance-wise, arcade machines were still running laps around home consoles, which were always kind of playing catch-up with all the arcade ports they were getting. Yeah, you weren't gonna get, say, an arcade-level port of Alpha Mission on there, although bless its heart, it still did try, but in the same year, the NES could play a pretty mean Galaga. During this generation, arcades were still the best place for both developers who wanted to create the most impressive games around, but also for the players who wanted to play them. Fast forward a few years to the 4th generation of consoles, and these things could more faithfully recreate more advanced arcade experiences, so naturally these generations saw tons more arcade quality, or at least close to arcade quality ports. That's no surprise. But in the 5th generation of consoles, puberty showed that it could in fact strike again, which I don't think is normal. You should probably get that checked out. With the majority of console manufacturers switching to CD-based games as opposed to cartridges, games could be even bigger now. Combine this with home consoles placing much more emphasis on 3D graphics and the PS1 doing, well, PS1 things, and the market for home console video games became larger than it ever had been before, and this has all basically been a really long-winded way of saying no one gives a damn about asteroids now.
Now let's say you're a pretty popular video game company and you own the rights to a game that was once super duper mega popular back in the 80s, but it hasn't really seen much action since. Now you take a look at the PS1, how successful that's gotten, and what I'm trying to say here is, what else would you do here?
One day I went down to my local game shop and saw that there were a surprising number of classic arcade titles, all with a multitude of subtitles that all basically said, "Buckle up, bitch, you know what time it is." Now, to clear some stuff up just in case, I'm not talking about arcade games directly ported to the PS1 in the form of collections such as these, for example. They aren't really trying anything new or to be something they aren't, they're just the arcade games as you remember them on a circle. Although these are pretty interesting to me as well. These are some of the first instances I can find of these games being regarded and marketed as they would be today, as classics. But a fair bit of the more popular titles weren't content to just sit on a disc and look old, they demanded respect.
And I'm happy to give it.
This is where all of these arcade revivals came into play, because there's just so much left untold the first time. These all essentially follow the same formula. Take the core gameplay of a classic arcade title, maybe touch it up a bit, and design a more modern game around it. Throw in a story mode that'll rival the works of Tolkien, and you're all set to ring in all the old bastards that grew up with the original game. Now, did the strategy actually work?
Well, it worked on my dad. I don't mean Q*bert's my dad, I mean my dad.
This is Q*bert. We all know him, we all love him. Don't try to dispute that fact, he looks like he'd cry if you did. This is actually one of the first PS1 games I got, courtesy of my dad. But was this actually a good purchase?
Why are you asking me? We haven't played it yet.
Game starts off with Q*bert chasing this blue thing around, and no, I don't know why, but does he really need a reason to? Well, I opened the manual up to check out some plot details and found out that there are way more of these things than I thought. Apparently, the plot here goes as follows. Q*bert's homeworld and friends have been kidnapped by his archenemy, Coily.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Still don't really know who this blue guy is, but apparently it has one of the 4 pieces of the great disc Q*bert is looking for. All things considered, this game plays it pretty safe when adapting the arcade classic into a home console epic. You still jump around claiming cubes in these strange drug trip looking levels, it's pretty much just Q*bert exactly where we left off. That makes this game a pretty fun time, just a simple romp through some Q*bert levels, this time with a more concrete goal in mind instead of just prolonging the end. Not too much more to say about the core gameplay here, it's Q*bert, we all know what that entails. Although, as a byproduct of this game being more quote-unquote story-focused, there's a bit more level design at play here than your standard Q*bert arcade joint. You can also just say fuck it to the main campaign, play Q*bert how God intended, or go head-to-head with a friend. All in all, pretty good package.
I know I've made a good few jokes at their expense during this video, but honestly, there's nothing wrong with these types of games. In fact, their existence just straight up makes sense. You take an already established gameplay loop that you know works and introduce it to a completely new generation of console users while reintroducing it to the people who grew up loving it. However, Q*bert here hangs a lot closer to what's been proven to work than some other arcade revivals do.
This game and a good chunk of the other arcade revivals of this time have a big ol' Atari logo slapped on them, which is kind of a big ol' lie. The goal here was most definitely to show consumers, hey, it's Atari, you remember Atari, right? The good old lulling them into a false sense of security move, it's a classic. I mean, yeah, these are Atari properties, but the Atari name has changed hands more times than my ex, so that really means nothing. Atari themselves didn't develop or publish these games, they literally couldn't. Their assets were bought out by Hasbro Interactive in 1998. Yes, Hasbro owned the Atari name, but what they wanted you to believe was Atari was basically just a puppet king. These games were all pretty much outsourced to different smaller development teams. 1999's Q*bert was developed by Artec and published by Hasbro. Aside from the name, it's about as Atari as, I don't know, my arm. Hasbro was at the forefront of this whole arcade revival joint, mostly with their newly acquired properties from Atari, but they were actually doing this a good bit before their Atari acquisition. By a good bit before, I mean about a year prior. Enter Frogger.
Ew, no!
Shortly after obtaining the Frogger license from Konami, Hasbro put this behemoth out and nothing was the same since. This game sold gangbusters, and I'm talking top 20 PS1 games in terms of sales levels of gangbusters. This is most definitely what inspired Hasbro to do this with a bunch of the IPs they acquired from Atari, starting with Centipede on the PC. Ah, that's not a PS1. Now, what actually is this game?
I don't fucking know, okay?
Game starts, we're showing Frog. Good. This game takes a bit of a different approach than Q*bert did, opting to redesign the gameplay loop of the arcade classic itself, placing its tile-hopping gameplay in a more exploration-based series of challenges with the goal of getting all 5 Froglings in a level. Sounds simple, right? Well, I'm convinced this game was sent from whatever realm was waiting for me on the other side with the express goal of tormenting me. When I first started playing this game, I really didn't like it. Frogger just felt a bit off to control. There was the slightest bit of sluggishness to his moves that messed me up constantly. The camera constantly changes angles and zoom levels, which can sometimes make it really hard to see obstacles that are coming. This game also has my absolute favorite piece of game design, arbitrary time limits. This is a game about memorizing patterns. None of the Frogger games I can think of post this one have included time limits because it clashes with how the games want you to approach each challenge. That is to hang back, watch, and make your move when you've grasped the rhythm of whatever it is that's going on. Am I also just bad at this game? Yes, very. On paper, this should make for a game that I play for a bit, decide isn't for me, and then go on with my life never thinking about it again. However, the more I played this, the more I familiarized myself with this game's core design philosophy, and the more I grew to really respect it. The more you die and the more you wrestle with this game's frustrating aspects, the more you learn about each level, what the best routes are, and that you can actually stand on the lily pad. Seriously, how did I not notice this? When I saw this big bird, I thought it'd be an enemy I'd have to avoid, but turns out, no, you ride the bird. That's like 4 points out of 10 right there. Now, the reason this thing sold so much is definitely because of the recognizability of that original game, and this was one of the first games to really do something like this, so naturally it got people curious. And credit where credit's due, the idea of making more focused levels based around the core Frogger gameplay loop is absolutely killer, which is evident by the fact that this was far from the last Frogger game. However many Frogger games you think there are, double it. There are so many of these things. This right here isn't actually the first Frogger game I've dabbled in, it's more like the third, and I do think they get better. I didn't really play too much of the PS1 entry for this occasion, all things considered, so it's tough to say if I really think this game is good or not, but despite all that bitching I was doing before, it is calling to me. Which I think is a symptom of schizophrenia, but what do I know?
Two very different takes on an arcade revival right here. One opted to stick pretty close to its arcade roots, while another sought to reimagine its formula from the ground up. However, both of these games here were published by Hasbro, and yeah, they were willing to make cootie. Who else was gonna do it? However, Hasbro wasn't the only company indulging in a bit of nostalgia bait back then. Asteroids.
Activision sure is a company, isn't it? Known mostly for, I don't know man, they published Asteroids on PS1, that's all that's important right now. Wait, hold on, let me just check something real quick. Asteroids is a trademark and copyright of Atari Interactive Inc., a Hasbro affiliate. I'm starting to rethink my purpose here. This game has a lot in common with the Q*bert remake in that it's basically a straight conversion of the arcade gameplay with a more structured story that you can peek in the menu to get spoiled on. As for gameplay itself, this is basically just Asteroids, but a bit more. Just some added item pickups, more asteroid types, and more ships. Like Q*bert again, that makes for a pretty decent game all around, but if you're not super into Asteroids, then what the hell are you doing here?
What the hell am I doing here?
Yeah, Asteroids never did much for me, and this isn't really either. It's a respectable title, but really for me, it's not that much different from just playing normal Asteroids. Although this game does have one really cool secret unlockable. The original arcade game. It's just here. Just for fun, let's check out the manual of this one again, just for some shits and giggles. Wait, there's Space Invaders 2? What's next, Galaga? Okay, fair play, that one was kinda obvious. Galaga Destination Earth is up next. We're given this kinda cool introductory sequence on how the Galaga invaded in 1981, and hey, like the year Galaga came out, neat. Also, did not know that Galaga was the name for the aliens. For all I knew, that could've just been what they called the Space DMV, I don't know. This game's got a lot of pre-recorded cutscenes in it, and I kinda love this. There's just something special about those hazy old PS1 cutscene sequences that just puts a smile on my face. This game right here, this, guess what?
It's pretty good.
This might be the best arcade revival I played for this video. It does such a great job at building onto the original Galaga formula with these great perspective switching sequences. Sometimes it's just simple Galaga, then they bring the camera off to the side, kinda like Gradius, and then you're right up behind the ship, Star Fox style. However, none of these different styles really change up the gameplay so much that it feels drastic whenever you switch between them. You still dodge and shoot aliens like you would in normal Galaga, but just with a different perspective. This camera switching system also allows for some great and dynamic set pieces. Flying through the remains of a crumbling ship, or what I think is a defense base on the rings of Saturn, which if that's the case, that is badass. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a few gripes I have with this game. The item pickup hitbox is deceptively small, and that combined with the camera angles you'll be getting, and you're going to be missing a lot of stuff you think you should be getting. There also doesn't really seem to be a way to save the game in this one, you just go until the end, that's kinda wonky. But this game still kinda kicks ass, I think I'm just gonna keep playing this one.
There's a bunch more games like this that I can pick out and talk about that I didn't, but honestly there's not much I can really say about them that I didn't say with the other ones. Missile Command does a great job of recontextualizing the original arcade game in its story mode, making it a great purchase for anyone who enjoyed that original arcade game. The multitudes of Frogger games post-1997 do a bit of a better job at designing a fully fledged adventure around the original arcade gameplay. And Breakout is a topic for another day.
As alluded to earlier, you can boil these types of games down into a few different categories. Ones that drastically overhaul what you can expect from the original arcade title, like with Frogger, ones that stick pretty close to the original just with improved graphics, a few gameplay additions, and maybe a story mode like with Asteroids or Qbert, and ones that fall somewhere in the middle, usually shaking up the formula a bit more while still playing things decently by the books, like with Destination Earth. To be completely honest with you guys, when I first started looking into this topic, I did so partially with the intent of making fun of it. Oh, look at this failed attempt to recapture the magic of insert arcade game here. But I can see now that that was the completely wrong mindset to go into this with. These games are, for the most part, solid. They didn't light the world on fire, but they weren't really meant to. And if the ads I saw on the manuals are anything to go by, there's so many more of these things lurking around in every corner that I didn't get to. Just like, Wheel of Fortune. I didn't even touch on Pac-Man World here, which is easily the most popular of the revivals to come out of this era, bar none. One of the main reasons I love collecting and learning about older games is that it's always a treat to pick out market trends and weird connecting threads between games from 20 odd years ago. And this has probably been one of my favorites to learn about recently, right alongside the Simple series. Not only were these some of the first times that certain games would really start to be regarded as classics by the wider population, as stated before, but these arcade revivals are some of the first examples of video game remakes that I can really point to. Aside from maybe the Super Famicom version of Dragon Quest III, but that happened literally one console generation after the original's release. Well, it's about damn time. That's right, all of this is Breakout's fault. It's cool to see each development team's spin on what a new take on older games could mean. This stuff is just really neat.
Wow, what an informative little romp that was. Now I think I can finally successfully start to revitalize this old mayonnaise. What the hell happened here?